Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. I'm your host, Yannis Papadakis, Business Development Manager at Crexi, and today we are thrilled to sit down with Andy Flack of Homeland Properties. Before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about our guest. Andy Flack has 37 years experience as a state of Texas licensed real estate broker, specializing in the land, timberland, and high-profile real estate business. His responsibilities include market and property analysis, research, strategic planning, and assisting clients with acquisition and disposition. Most clients are corporate industrial owners, developers, TIMOs, REITs, private equity groups, and high net worth individuals and families. Mr. Flack has consulted and directed sales of over 1 million acres in Texas since 2000. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Sam Houston State University in agribusiness with over 40 postgraduate hours in real estate economics. He also holds the prestigious title of an accredited land consultant through the Realtors Land Institute. Most recently, Andy is an inaugural winner of one of Crexi's Platinum Broker Awards for land sales. Andy, welcome to the podcast. Let's dive in.
Thank you, Yannis.
And welcome to the podcast. I'm
Yes,
excited to dive in with you. Now, before I get started on this talk track here, tell me a little bit about land. Land is, kind of a scary word for a lot of brokers because it's a tougher product in a lot of senses. How did you get, so expert at land? What brought you towards it? How did you get that start?
Well, Yannis, I think in our part of the world, we're in East Texas. My office is in Huntsville, Texas, which is right on Interstate 45 north of Houston. And our back is kind of to the west, and we sort of point east. And our territory is about 40 counties in East Texas, which makes up the majority of the East Texas wood basket. And prior to the year 2000, we really didn't have a whole lot of land for sale over here. In 2000, Champion International merged with International Paper. They were two of the large industry paper company and wood supply companies in the world. And when that happened, it started a little bit of a chain reaction. International Paper sold most of their holdings in the United States, and Champion sort of dissolved into International Paper, and then later Louisiana Pacific was another large timberland owner, and so they dissolved their ownership in Texas, and then not too long after that, Temple Inland followed suit. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 million acres sort of released itself over about a 5-year period in the early 2000s. And
what was the onus for that? Was there something that was related that, kind of knocked over the dominoes and started this?
Well, I think most of the industry experts will tell you that at that time, it was a way to free up capital for the industry timberland owners. So they, you had so much money tied up in timberland, your own ownership, versus buying wood from private entities in ownership, and it ties up a lot of capital. And that was probably the main reason why. Different structures. So you had a lot of large corporate structured ownerships changing to real estate investment trusts, or REITs, if you will, timberland investment management organizations, or TIMOs, if you will. And so because of that structure and the change in the industry, I think is why we saw that happen.
So it sounds like it almost like a dam broke, and it was just this huge rush of a ton of property that was suddenly available that, historically hadn't been available. In those days, how did you form relationships with the institutional landowners early on in your career? And then what key strategic decisions or lessons would you say helped establish your firm as the expert in these East Texas land transactions?
Well, it was a very small niche of people back then that could handle or even knew the areas not well enough to, in the real estate business, to even navigate through some of the dispositions that were put out to the public. So, what happened was these companies decided that some of those lands were non-strategic in terms of forest land or timberland ownership. So they would put those properties out for sale to the public, basically the first time open market offering. And we're still doing those today, even after 20 years. But we were just positioned in, I guess, the right location, covering the right areas. And, I did have a good experience in the business. I'd been in it at that time, about 16, 17 years. There weren't near as many real estate people, period, back then, but
right.
Especially in the land markets. So the opportunity arose, and we grasped at it and did well with it. And from there, our word just spread, and we continued to do well with it. And so our customer base grew. It continues to grow. We continue to have that niche, if you will. We've grown from a couple of agents to about 17 agents now.
Wow.
We're not trying to get overly huge with people, because we like to sell land. We don't mind managing people, but if you get too many people, you end up managing people instead of selling land. But anyway, that's the point. That's how we've gotten from there to here. And those lands, that 3 million acres of land, continues to trickle down.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm curious. You said something that I think is so important for anybody watching to understand, and that is, that there is a niche, and with the word niche also suggests expertise, right? That you actually have expertise, knowledge in a specific market, in a specific product. Can you touch on your philosophy about staying an expert every day in your field, right? In my past life, I was a broker, and on the handful of times I took on a land listing, it became immediately apparent to me that I didn't know enough about land, to sell a piece of it. And here I was selling, multi-million-dollar apartment buildings and retail, but it was just land. There are so many, details, and I thought, oh, it's land. It's simple, right? Land is easy. There's no building on it. It's really not that easy. There are so many, nuances to land. So could you talk a little bit about, how you become an expert and then stay an expert?
Well, sure. I mean, first, I guess you have to start with education. Get your education. From education, you gain knowledge, and from everything else, you gain knowledge, and then from knowledge, you gain experience, and then you prove your experience, and that goes just by working in the business every day. And we stay on the front lines. We're constantly dealing with the sellers and owners of timberland or land in general, and then we're being approached by buyers every day. So we're creating the market as it goes. We're on as close to the market as you can get on a daily basis. So it just takes time. Young people in the business just need to stick with it. I mean, I had a mentor tell me, just one brick at a time is what you have to do. Stick with it every day. You're going to have your setbacks, but as long as your setbacks are less than your progress, you're going to progress. And we've been doing this a long time. We're in our 38th year, and we are very successful. But I didn't look like that when I was in my second, third, or fifth year so much. So it just takes time. And I think as you gain those things, that experience, that knowledge, and you prove yourself, you sort of dig your niche into the market. I think every successful real estate broker gets a niche, whether it be industrial, commercial, income properties, residential, land, whatever it is. You always seem to find your niche. And it's pretty amazing how small those niches can be. And but it just takes time.
Right. That's good advice. I think staying power is really, the difference between being able to, have longevity in a market long enough to become an expert, right? If your finger is always on the pulse, then you're not missing anything, right? You're advancing, your knowledge as the market is advancing too. I was hoping, could you touch on your recent Crexi Platinum Broker Award for land sales? Congratulations on that, by the way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it too. I mean, the award falls under the commercial category, I suppose. And I guess land is a commercial asset in terms of especially lands that are changing use. And so 2021 was a really busy year. I mean, everybody knows post-COVID, we had, I guess, pre-COVID and post-COVID, but we had a lot of demand for smaller tracts and development tracts because the small retail tracts is what dictates the market. So when there's a lot of demand for that, then the developers want to go out and buy bigger tracts to create small tracts. And we had a lot of that too in 2021. So we work a lot of areas, what we call transition areas, especially north and northeast Houston, whereby we've got timberland that's been industrial forest land for 150 years, and all of a sudden the next wave of population and development is fixing to take us over. And so we have to that land transitions out of that asset class, if you will, into development property. We had a significant amount of that property change hands in 2021. So I think that it's been going on for more than just 2021, but for several years now. So, but 2021 was really kind of off the charts.
Awesome. Well, it's great to hear, and always happy to know when Crexi is a part of the formula for having such a breakout year. Always love to hear the success stories. Moving on to our next topic, let's dive into land in East Texas. Can you describe what sets East Texas apart from other parts of, or other counties in the state?
Well, you're talking about the state of Texas, and it's a very diverse state. It's big. Everybody knows that. It's very diverse. There's a lot of different ecological systems going on. So East Texas in itself is diverse because of the pine trees, for the most part. But certainly there are all types of diversities inside the East Texas piney woods, but that's what people draw them to East Texas is mostly the pine trees. They're evergreen, and I guess it gives you that feel all year long versus hardwood trees that lose their leaves during the winter. So I think we have a lot of rolling topography in East Texas as well. It's a very pretty region and area. Some people don't realize how severe the topography can get because the pine trees kind of block the views in certain places. But
right,
I think that's the biggest draw in East Texas. Everybody knows East Texas for its pine trees.
Nice. So what market shifts would you say you've seen in the last 15 years or so?
Market shifts, I would say, well, it's all generated by the growing population in Texas.
Right.
People want to be in Texas. I think that goes without saying. There are a lot of attractions here. I just mentioned some of the diversity of the whole state. There's a lot of space. Our infrastructure is in pretty good shape, although with growing populations, you have pressures on infrastructure, your roads, your highways, your utilities, etc. But those growing populations obviously start are exponentially greater in the metropolitan areas, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin.
Right.
And so it radiates from there and creates a halo effect that goes out from those populated areas. And then, it just dissipates as the further you get from those populations. And so that has created a lot more demand for raw land from developers that want to take 1,000 acres and break it into 2 to 5 acre tracts to people that want a 10 or 20 acre tract for a weekend place.
And to that, I'm curious, what are the different types of investors that are coming in and buying this land? Are we seeing a large amount of development versus recreational versus, housing expansion because, the population is being pushed out from those large metro centers further and further away?
Well, it's all the above right now. Yes, we're developers, home builders, I mean, they usually are one of the first buyers from the developers. Is a home builder might buy a pod of lots in a subdivision that may be anywhere from 10 lots to 200 lots to build homes on, in arrangement with a developer to sell those houses out. And it may be another development where it's 2 to 5 acres and they're not doing any builder lots. They may have a few preferred builders in there that you would go and hire them to build your custom home. So we're getting everything. But we've also got there's some demand for solar power right now in East Texas. There's a lot of that going around. There's a little renewed interest. We've seen a little bit of renewed interest in oil and gas because oil and gas is up right now, as everybody knows. So, but for the most part, our land sales have been 90% of our land sales have been to retail buyers or developers creating properties for retail buyers.
Got it. Interesting. I'm curious, do builders, when they buy, timberland, I take it most of them are probably not set up to actually harvest the timber. Do they sell that because they own the timber rights too? Do they typically sell that to somebody else to clear for them and then, get a discount on the wood when they build the property? How does that work?
Well, there's an open market for timber anytime you want to cut it or sell it. It's just a matter of what you want to get for it.
Right.
So there are consulting foresters that you can hire that can merchandise the timber for you, and you can get it cut quickly if you're willing to take a little bit of a discount on the price, because most loggers, if you will want a contract for a year, and if you want to get it cut in 60 or 90 days, they'll come do it, but they got to push some other things around, so it's going to cost you. You may not get what they would consider market price, but there's an open market for logs any time of year. You can cut it right now.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Well, zooming back a bit, Texas is booming overall in investment activity, transaction volume, and population growth. On a broader scale, what will impact Texas's surging population growth have on land parcels in Eastern Texas? We've already talked about the halo effect that we're seeing from those, urban centers. Is that something that is already being felt on maybe transaction volume or even, pricing going up? Are we starting to see, that population growth having a larger effect than maybe anticipated?
I think definitely. In 2015, the economists projected that Texas's population would double in 2050. And so we're 7 years into that prediction, and we're ahead of that schedule. I think COVID changed some people's dynamics. People want to get out of the cities. They want to get more away from population, or at least have a place to go. And so that has changed demand. It has changed pricing, which has gone up, and we continue to see that. I mean, the markets are softening slightly because interest rates have been bumped. Gas prices are up, inflation's up. So, the economists will tell you that everything we're seeing right now points to a recession in about a year.
Right.
From the ones I read and I've heard, I don't think we're talking about a major recession, but that all depends on what happens between now and the end of the year too.
Right. Do you anticipate any slowdowns in transaction volume or, adjustment of investor interest in East Texas, or does it seem like it's all signs go?
Well, we've seen a little bit of slowdown, but look, 2019 was an excellent, fantastic market. It was better than 18, it was better than 17, which was better than 16. So each of those years increased. Then we got to 2020 and COVID hit, early February, March.
Right.
And the market went kind of topsy-turvy and nobody knew what was going to happen. So for about, the first 6 months of 2020, we thought, well, we could be out of business, I guess, if nobody buys any land. I mean, theoretically, but it turned around. So the market reacted completely opposite. It went from, sort of a panic mode to negative panic mode to a positive panic mode for the land markets. And so the end of 2020 and all of 21, everybody just was going crazy. Well, I think that's softened a little bit. So you say, well, is that going to slow down? I think it has slowed down a little bit, but we're back to we're still better than 2019 markets.
Right.
Remember,
right. Yeah. It stepped back to those elevated levels
exactly,
of before.
Yeah. It stepped back to an elevated level. So, it should slow down from 2021, but you kind of can't count 20 and 21 in a 10-year projection period.
Those are asterisk
10-year
years.
look back. So I think we're right on schedule personally.
Yeah. It's like the Baseball Hall of Fame. Sometimes there's an asterisk by the by the record. Yeah, 20.
That's a good analogy. Yeah,
they're gonna be asterisk years. All right. On to our last topic. What pieces of advice would you give to investors looking to acquire land in your market? What are some simple or maybe some not obvious, things that an investor should keep an eye out for or should be aware of?
Well, good tracts always sell. Good tracts always sell in bad markets and good markets. And so, yes, prices are being driven up, and I see investors hesitating because prices are moving up. But I think about, okay, these are the same people that were hesitating 5 years ago and didn't buy something. And now they look, well, I should have bought back then. So they're doing the same thing over and over. You're going to get left behind if you don't make, a good decision, but a structured market decision, because you got to read the market or trust the people that are reading the market for you. And if you don't buy, you're going to look back in the rearview mirror again, and you're going to say, well, I should have bought that. So look for good tracts, good solid tracts with all the attributes that make one a good tract, and then make a good structured decision for the market and don't look back.
Right. I remember, I forgot who it was. It said the best time to real estate is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now.
That's correct. So. You're exactly right. Especially in Texas. 20 years ago, our markets, like almost 38 years here, I've never seen, the market's never gone down since I've been in business.
It's funny. You don't need a crystal ball sometimes to see what's obvious, right? Yeah. I remember 2016, 2015, a lot of investors that we were working with in California-based investors had singularly shifted focus onto Texas. And show us what you have in Texas, what deals you have in Texas, multifamily, retail, everything. And like in 2016, I thought, it seems to be a very high percentage of people, in our local market that's looking here. Here we are 6 years later, and that hasn't slowed down. It has increased. So I'm with you on that. We can see on the data on Crexi that, deals in Texas get a lot of attention from every region, not just within the state. So.
Well, it's like October 2008 with the subprime debacle that happened. Our market went down, but it was like hitting a chug hole. That's all it was. We came right back out of it in 2009. We haven't slowed down since. But,
yep.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your insights, especially on such important and timely topics. We really do appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, so thank you for taking the morning to sit down with us.
Well, thank you, Yannis. I just want to thank Crexi for what y'all are doing as well. I really appreciate your today, but I also appreciate the promptness of your information and how you treat your customers and the data you're putting out and sharing with everybody.
Thank you. It's a tremendous compliment, especially coming from somebody that's out there crushing it every day for years. To have you say, "Hey, we like what you're doing and it works," that's a tremendous compliment. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any last words? Where can people find you online if they want to get in touch? Email, social media? How do we get in touch with Andy?
Yeah, so our website's homelandproperties.com, or you can also look at homelandland.com. My email is andy@homelandprop.com. Our phone number is easy, 936-295-2500. Or you can just look up Andy Flack on the internet. In some ways, unfortunately, I'm everywhere, the face of the company, but that's okay. We like that, and we've got plenty of people here waiting to help you.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who tuned in today. If you enjoyed this episode, do not miss the next one. Go to go.crexi.com/podcast and sign up to get the next episode delivered straight to your inbox. Of course, you can also subscribe to the Crexi Podcast on your favorite podcast app, and also check out our YouTube channel for video recordings of each episode. Take care and be sure to tune in next time.
Thank you.